have I got something for you to round off the week today. This was a completely free gaming computer. And if you thought things looked rough on this side with everything going on, you haven't seen around this side yet. Now, I don't even know how this has got this dirty. The stickers aren't holding up too well. It's very reflective. And if we look even further around the back, half the internals have become entirely dislodged. So, let's just get this thing open. This was given to me as sort of a, I don't need it anymore, could you take a look at it computer. So it's cost me nothing, because look at it. I mean, I already recognise the case. This is a special of all of the, I'd say probably around 5 to 6 year old budget build computers. I believe this is the CIT7. It has a 7 on the front. We have 2 screws. That's it. That's just gonna fall. Alright, what have we got going on in here? Well, there is a stick, an 8GB stick of RAM, actually. That's good. There's also another 8GB stick of RAM in here. Hey, there's 16 gigs of RAM. I'm going to put these back. The motherboard likes to wobble. There is a graphics card with plenty of wiring going to it. We take this out. It's an NVIDIA. It's something. Free computers, everyone. This is what they're like. Oh my god, I've just seen the amount of dust in the fan. Okay, honestly, as far as it goes, that's a decent looking Asus board. It actually looks quite new. What else have we got going on? So we do actually at least have 2 6-pins from the 500 watt unnamed power supply. The fan, oh, I'm gonna have to insert B-roll of the fan because I don't know if this is doing it justice. Let me try and zoom in. So I don't know how bad that looks here, but let me just get a cloth. I don't think the inside of this is meant to be black. Oh yeah. Oh look, it's just all falling out now. Oh, this is beautiful. So yeah, this has just been given to me. I don't know if it works. I've not tried turning it on, and I have no idea what the actual specifications are, other than we know it's got 16 gigs of RAM, a motherboard that we've never seen before, and a little Alaska cooler. Those were common back in the day. Let's plug it in. That seems like a good idea. I'm sure this will be great for eat, sleep, game mode, play to win. Yes, if it works. We're going to have to do something with this. I think we're going to have to entirely rebuild it. Right, have I got a monitor? What do we think? Before it turns on, is it going to give us a post signal? Leave a comment, I suppose, or something. Right, let's go for it. Oh, couple of presses. A horrible grinding noise has begun. What is making that noise? Is it... Oh, wait, it has actually turned on. H55. What was... H55 was first gen. That's a really nice looking first gen board. That's quite a modern looking Asus unit. What is making that noise? Is there something in one of the fans? Is it this? Okay, so it's not the processor. Okay, it's none of the fans making the grinding noise. I can see hard drives. What is making the noise? It changes pitch if I touch the bottom. The fans are also now going crazy. Right, have I got a keyboard? I actually need a keyboard to plug into this now. This is just getting more and more mysterious. I wasn't expecting it to post, but they were using it. So I guess I kind of should have. Oh, yes, this is, Poop 9. Yeah. So I think off the top of my head is they were having problems because they were going to give this to their friend, but then thought no. And I don't even. Would it be 000? No, maybe 1 2 3 4. Nope. 1 1 1 1. I forgot my pin. Is it logging us into Poop 9? We are simply going to have to roll with the punches on this one because I thought this might end up a members video and just go nowhere, but there could be a gaming PC in this, and if it does work, I have a little bit of a plan. I kind of want to restore it and then give it back to them for it to go to their friend because I've got so many computer parts. But this has probably seen a lot of use, and it's still going. Oh yeah, this is something. Right, whatever Windows is on here, it can go. We'll put Windows 11 on here, IoT. But before we even do that, I do want to know what the specifications are. Have I got like a live boot? The fans are going crazy. Right, if I've got a live boot thing, let's plug it in and actually see what the specs are, because I have no clue. That noise is at just such a pitch that it is, incredibly infuriating. Right, turn it off. The off button is a little bit broken. Right, we need to start a list. Have I got a pen and paper? Because I need to write down a list of everything I've noticed wrong already. Oh, the noise. The noise is driving me insane. 1. Find. Okay, it's just turned itself off while I was writing. What are the specs? Find noise is number 1. Find... Oh, I saw i7 pop up. 2 Western Digital drives. 1... Another drive. Does it tell us the graphics card? No, but we do have a Core i7-860 at 2.8 GHz. That's not terrible. So find specs, we're doing it. 3. I think 3 just needs to be fix it. And 4. Upgrade it. Oh, that noise. I need to do something about that noise. I keep complaining about it. Right, off. Where do we even begin? Let's take a little look. How are we looking behind? Okay, not that bad. It's a bit all over the place. I think there's a hard drive. There's a hard drive here. Turn it on, and I'm going to unplug things until the noise stops. How's that for a solution? Okay, that's unplugged. Where's the other noise coming from? Unplug that. We got that going there. Dongles and adapters and gizmos for days. Okay, and there's an SSD here, which is a... Okay, actually a rather good Western Digital green. This may all have to go. We probably can fit in hard drives. A 500GB and a 320GB. So a terabyte of storage all in all. Saying that though, the noise is still there faintly. I think it was just a cacophony of everything. Why don't we see if we can see what the complete specs are real quick. This all unplugged because this is just... I don't want to deal with it. To try and boot to anything, to Poo 6 or whatever the name was. Fortunately for everyone involved, you can't see round the back where I've left all the cables hanging out. Right, we've got a USB port. Can we now boot to Linux real quick and see what the specs are? That should be able to tell us everything. How many watts has that got on the rails? 217 amps. That's not terrible if it's telling the truth. Okay, delete to run setup. There we go. Okay, now we should be able to actually find out the full specs of what this has, if it can survive long enough without thermally throttling and probably shutting down in the meantime. Okay, or it will just boot loop over and over again. I mean, it should be able to run elementary OS, but I can't tell if it's the operating system making it do that, or the general state of affairs inside the computer. It could be either. Is it maybe booting? Let this see if it can actually boot. So in our next scene, we'll either be at a Linux dashboard, or I'll be installing Windows to try and see if it can survive. Honestly, oh, we have a mouse cursor. It may actually boot to Linux. I mean, to be fair, this could also be worse, because that means it could be shutting down not for thermals, not because of the operating system, but because of a random hardware defect. I mean, it could just be dirt. Very dirty. Well, it nearly got there, and then we got to the home screen, and then we got a black screen, and now we're here. So I'm guessing the front USB ports are struggling. I mean, it keeps saying maybe the USB cable is bad. I don't know what that graphics card is. It looks old. I mean, yeah, it looks like it could probably use some TLC to say the least, but we'll wait and see. I mean, it has got a security seal on it. Well, some good news, it hasn't turned off again, but at the same time, I've just tried Linux again, and no dice. So I'm going to plug back in this SSD, and overwrite it with an install of Windows. I'm sure we can try Linux on this. I just want to see if it will survive getting to Windows, and if it does, I will tear it apart, and I will rebuild it. If Poop9 here can survive installing an operating system, and then survive running 3D Mark, I will, and I promise you, I will take this apart, and I will fix it, and we will benchmark it, and then if it can handle upgrades, I'll throw some in. Because this will be going to someone probably that will want to use it as a computer. And in its current state, I mean, the processor's fine for basic gaming. 16 gigs of RAM's fine. I don't think noise cancellation's going to cancel out some of the noise from these fans. And now we just pray that it manages to actually format itself and install. The next step of installing devices is causing this to go crazy. Does anything feel hot? That's the stupidest thing. Nothing actually feels... The graphics card feels a little bit hot. Nothing feels particularly hot, so I don't know why the fans keep going crazy and it keeps being so loud. It's just so obnoxious. I cannot believe it. I have just been hearing a cacophony of various noises as I'm sat here on my desk editing other bits. It's actually installed Windows 11. It's actually done it. This close to being at a dashboard. Come on, give us Windows. It's done it. We're actually at a dashboard. This is what I mean about Windows 11 IoT, very, very low RAM usage because there's nothing installed on here. I mean, do we have Ethernet drivers? I've got an Ethernet cable. Oh, the fans have gone crazy and it's just stopped responding to everything. It's just a blue screen. I'm fairly sure DPC Watchdog is just driver. It could just be a one-off, but no, that's another blue screen. What if I unplug Ethernet? No way. Right, yeah, Ethernet kills the computer. Right, there's no trickery here. This is just an Ethernet cable to my router. There is a router just up there. I have my own little business line. All I'm going to do is plug this in. And if it blue screens... Yeah, okay, plug... That's a different one. Plugging in... I've got to do it a third time. I need to know that the Ethernet cable is what makes it blue screen. Okay, I've been outside. As you can see here, I'm not making anything up. 11 minutes uptime. System is completely stable. It's running fine. Memory usage is low. CPU usage is low. No overheating at the moment. Let's plug this in again. Ethernet is going in now. It hasn't blue screened. So I could be wrong. Oh no, it has. It's died. It's going to give us a blue screen any second now to tell us you plugged in an Ethernet cable, you're no longer allowed to use your computer. Well, it's all going swimmingly so far, isn't it? Oh, the hideous noise is back. Well, we know that's not the hard drives now, because they aren't plugged in. It's not the fans. I don't know what else that could be. Is it going to be one of the ones where if I bash it, it'll just stop? Shall we try it? It changes tone. They just get worse. But then for some reason yesterday it also stopped doing this. It's so snappy to use. It sounds like it wants to die. It has to take to the graphics card. Oh, the noise. It just keeps on droning on and on and on. Oh, is it gonna do it? Come on, there's no way this actually works. No, it has just installed graphics drivers. It is a GeForce GTX 670 2GB, which we did look at the start of the year, and it was okay. I mean, the one we got was in a, was it Haswell system? So it sort of makes sense that a first-gen Core i would also have one of these. I mean, I'm gonna plug in my games drive. I'm gonna plug this in, and we are going to see if it survives 3D Mark real quick. While Steam spends the next hour trying to fix that, and we can't use Ethernet, time to break out the Elec Muga again. This adapter seemingly works in everything. One of the best stupid purchases I've ever made. Beautiful driver install screen, look at this. Of course it has budget builds, high-speed Wi-Fi. We have system information not available, system information not available, system information not available. We already know. First gen Core i7, GTX 670. Why does it run better when it's running a game? The fans have died down. It's silent now. While it's running Time Spy, quite well to be fair. I mean, it's getting about 10 to 13 FPS in Time Spy, which is solid. Well, the fan has ramped up, but it's not going crazy. Under the average for this level of hardware. But how are temperatures? Okay, the CPU, there is no overclocking headroom. It peaks out at 88 degrees, and the graphics card is about the same, peaks out in the mid-80s. Oh, we have to take it apart now. We are going to have to take this apart and rebuild it, because I said if it survives, we will try and resurrect this. So there's our baseline score. Let's see what we can do. Have I got a screwdriver? Thermal paste, we'll need that. I want to take this graphics card out. All right, let's unplug these hard drives. So we've got a 500 gig Seagate. What is this power supply? I mean, we need to get it out anyway so we can sort out the cables. We'll see if it's any good. It might be one from a brand that's decent, but I'm assuming we have to take out the Western Digital drive. The hard drive is just mounted straight here. Oh, that has been in there a while. There's a Western Digital 320 gig. Very of its era. Come on. All right, get all of these out. Are you gonna slide? Okay, yep. It's coming. Yeah, that's going. It's not the worst I've ever seen. I also think this power supply might be the cause of the noise. Maybe it's just got a bad fan bearing. Isn't that already looking better? How is the state of the processor? Pins are definitely worn, and it needs a good clean, but it was working, so we can reuse that. That's fine. Thermal paste is still pasty. That's nice. So I'm going to get to work trying to get this clean, I think, because it's just filth. Right, so it has now been entirely rebuilt. I've pretty much taken the entire thing apart, new motherboard standoffs, everything has been cleaned down in isopropyl alcohol, even the case is clean. Even the side plastic is as clean as I can get it. And getting off all the stickers took, a monumental amount of effort, but they are all gone. I've put in a new power supply, just a 500 watt iGo unit because it's actually somewhat safer. I'm still using the adapter just to test the GTX 670 does work, but it's time to find out if it now turns on and doesn't make the awful noise. Oh, and my personal favourite addition, that is a vertically mounted hard drive because there was nowhere else for it to go and I wanted it secured in. So there's one hard drive here, one hard drive here, and an SSD mounted in between them. Does it now turn on? The fan isn't moving, but that's fine. And there's no terrible noise. I do want to see why that fan's not working. Turns out the fins were see-through. Not actually black, that was just the grime. Still a bit of a mess behind, but there's not exactly room for cable management. So this bit here should be the front lights and the fan. Yep, those are now on. Is it booting? Why is it unhappy? Is it to do with the hard drives? I plugged in Ethernet. I'm an idiot. All of this, was it just crashing? Because I plugged in Ethernet. I forgot about the Ethernet thing. Watch this actually work now. Works fine. The computer is A-OK. Right, let me actually put this back together now then, because the computer boots to Windows fine. I'm just an idiot that forgot that Ethernet does crash it for some unknown reason. Probably drivers. My stupidity knows no bounds. But I don't really want to keep that graphics card in here. I do want to see if it'll launch a game real quick. But I've been trying to think what would be a good upgrade for this, because I've got a few options, but at the end of the day we can't really go too far with an original Core i7, and ideally we want it to be something that's going to be simple, reliable, and it's going to work. I've actually got an RX 460. Now it looks a lot less cool than that does, but to be fair, once the side panel's on you're not really going to notice, and this means that it'll be lower on power, so hopefully more reliable. It won't bottleneck the i7 too much. Well, it opens up a whole world of DirectX 12 and things like that. We have covered this in a video. It seems like a fair little upgrade to go from an old GTX 670 to a entry-level Polaris card, because these were solid little units. We were doing some decent gaming on this. It was a smoother experience than that was. Just for a bit of fun, I do kind of want to see what the out-of-box gaming experience is now like on a system like this. I mean, to be fair, cleaning it will have likely gained us a few frames, but probably not many. And the game has defaulted to minimum. VSync on half, we'll turn that off. We are already over the VRAM limit because this is Rockstar and it's stupid. Processor is doing alright. It's at about 100% utilization, but okay, honestly, it is getting 60 FPS here. I mean, I know it's minimum settings, and it probably wasn't doing that before, because I'd imagine it was probably getting closer to overheating. It's not a terrible pairing, because both the processor and the graphics card are pretty much at parity here. I mean, and this is a DirectX 12 title. I mean, we could leave the GTX 670 in there, but I feel like we've looked at it so much, and it's out of driver support, it's just a bit old, and leaving it with this sketchy adapter, I mean, you don't really want to leave that out of the PC if, you know, someone's going to be using this, because it's got a good power supply in it. I just don't really want to leave dodgy Molex adapters in there. Right, why don't we turn this off, and I think we're going to put in the RX 460. Oh, and that is very hot already, because that is Kepler. Oh, it's tiny in comparison, isn't it? And to think this is probably more powerful. So we'll let that boot up to Windows, put on some RX 460 drivers, which are up to date, unlike the Kepler drivers, and we should be all good to go to try and do a little bit of benchmarking. It's taken so long to get here. I mean, it's cost us nothing. I've just whacked in a spare power supply and a spare graphics card to keep it a bit less like a fire hazard, but I'm happy with that. So we'll let that boot up and then run some benchmarks. So let's recap everything real quick. I was given a completely free computer and this was mine to do with whatever I wanted. They were originally going to give it to their friend, but realistically, they tried to reset it, it was hardly functional, and given the state that when we first turned it on, it was thermally throttling and shutting down, and generally just had tons of problems, they decided against this. I've had this sat in my car for a little while and finished up with a few projects early this week, so I thought, you know what, why don't we actually take a look at this computer? And it was filthy. and it needed some major work. Now, it did turn on and function after we clipped everything back into place, but there was definitely some odd quirks. The fans were going crazy, there was odd noises coming from everywhere, and really it just needed some proper TLC. From what I know of this computer, it has been in use a long time. And I mean, that's entirely fair. It's survived this long and it has been running games, but it does need some TLC. So I've had this thing completely apart. It's had the entire set of components cleaned out and changed. I've added new motherboard standoffs, so the motherboard's actually in there a bit more stably. I've taken out the unbranded 500 watt power supply and replaced it with an actually branded iGo 500 watt unit. I've taken out the GTX 670 that was in there, which is an okay card, but really we can match that performance with an entry-level Polaris card, which is the RX 460 that's now in there, and we've just made everything all pleasant and nice to use. This took nearly a whole day after stripping it all out and getting it all back together. And there's still one issue with it, which is even with updated Ethernet drivers, it still wants to crash when you plug in Ethernet. I'm going to try rolling them back next and see if it fixes that, and I'll update you on that later, but that's what it's taken. I was given a free computer, we've side-graded a few components to modernize them, and that's bringing us to where we are today. It's running Windows 11 IoT on a Western Digital SSD, so the system feels snappy to use. Windows 11 IoT is incredibly cut down and easy to use, so it's not exactly a problem, and just getting about and using this computer has been beautifully speedy. It is very quick to use. I know it's an older Core i7 in here, but you do have 4 cores, 8 threads that are a decent clock speed. It's not overheating or thermally throttling. The RX 460 does have the advantage of slightly lower driver overhead compared to even Kepler's older drivers, so it's running really well. I have gone ahead and removed the Spectrum Meltdown patches just to get a bit of extra performance out of the system, and I have also overclocked the RX 460. It's nothing fancy, all I've done is increase the memory a little bit, increase the core and increase the power limits, just so we can now surpass the performance of the GTX 670 that was in here. So it's taken a whole day, well slightly over a whole day, but we've taken a free gaming computer and it actually looks pretty decent now. So what are the full specifications of our completely free gaming computer? Well, it's got a Core i7-860 in it, which I do believe we looked at last year, and if it wasn't last year, it was the year before, and it performed pretty good back then. Honestly, it really did blow me away just how competent these were holding up, and it's got 4 cores and 8 threads at 2.8 GHz. The motherboard does appear to be doing a bit of automatic boosting, but this is very limited, and it's usually topping out around 2.9 to 3 GHz, likely because we don't exactly have the best cooling, but it's enough to keep things stable. I've upgraded the graphics card to an AMD RX 460, which is entry-level Polaris. It still gets driver updates and pretty much offers old flagship performance that was in here before, but with lower power requirements and much less heat, as well as updated drivers and better DirectX 12 support. We do have 16GB of DDR3 included. I believe this is running at 1300 MHz based on the motherboard, but it may also go up to its full 1600 MHz. I'll have to take a little look and see if there's anything we can do there. Storage is a 120GB SSD and 750GB worth of hard drive space, which is mounted to the bottom of the case and also the side, which I thought was a beautiful addition and at least stops it vibrating and rattling. We have a rather modern looking 1156 motherboard, which was surprising because I thought the system was a lot newer than it really was, and the operating system is Windows 11 IoT. I've changed out the power supply and graphics card for peace of mind. It was fine running them as it was, but given the, I think it was the bearing on the power supply is on its way out, likely because the demand of running the 670, I thought, you know what, these power supplies are cheap enough that I can just whack one in. And the cost today has pretty much been nothing, because let's be honest, you didn't have to change these components. I've done them for peace of mind because someone will be getting this after I'm done with it. With all of this work we put into it though, cleaning the entire PC, taking it apart and all of this, what difference did it make? Well, when we went from a stock system to a clean system, nothing really changed. We gained 8 points overall, most of which were from the graphics card being slightly cleaner, and to be fair, we hadn't really touched the graphics card, we'd taken it out and put it back in. So, yes, we gained a couple of points, but honestly, cleaning a system, it might solve instability, which it did here, but at the same time, you don't really lose all too much performance from it being dirty unless it's literally stopping the fans moving. Changing graphics card did drop our actual graphics card score, not by much but still a sizable chunk. However, we resolved this by overclocking the graphics card and also tuning up the processor. There's very little tuning we could actually do. I mean, we disabled Spectre and Meltdown, and Windows 11 IoT is slightly easier on the processor than Windows 10 is, so I suppose it does have that going for it, but ultimately all of this work has culminated in an increase in score of 17 points. And I'm not really annoyed by that because, honestly, the PC only has to be able to run fine. The components are okay, they're good enough for what the next owner of this will likely be using it for. But, I mean, really, you could take this further. You could put on a new cooler and overclock the processor, you could whack in probably a better graphics card than this, but at the same time, it seems like a decent enough pairing given the age of the components. But what do all these scores mean? Well, if we actually take a look at the progression of the PC through the benchmarks, older DirectX 10 games should run beautifully, DirectX 11 shouldn't be a problem, DirectX 12 and entry-level newer DirectX 12 games should still run on the system, and it's only going to be the latest and greatest of titles that are really intensive, with Steel Nomad being a good representative of them, that are going to be completely unplayable on our little free gaming PC. Despite doing very little to the processor, it is actually performing surprisingly well here, coming in somewhere between a Core i5-2400 and a Ryzen 3 1200. I mean, it's closer to the Sandy Bridge i5, but at the end of the day, that's really rather solid processor side performance, given what we've seen out of both of its next two processors on the tier list, so I'm expecting that it'll be able to cope down okay. When it comes to the graphics card, well, the RX 460 will definitely be enough for the next owner of the computer. It is, even with an overclock, just around the same performance as a 750 Ti. Now, of course, the 750 Ti in this graph is also overclocked, but there's only 6 points between them, and I'd imagine DirectX 11 titles, the 750 Ti would take the win, and in newer DirectX 12 titles, well, the RX 460 would likely take the win there. So, you know what? The system, it's fairly well balanced, but you could likely get away with a better graphics card in here if you really wanted to. It must be said, though, that I have absolutely no idea how this is going to perform. I mean, I've got a rough idea on how the individual components will work, such as the RX 460. I mean, even the GTX 670 that was in here, we checked out its performance about 3 months ago, back at the start of the year, because we got one in a slightly higher-end pre-built, but still a very similar concept. You know, just, it was a solid graphics card for its era, but as we've seen, Kepler is lacking in DirectX 12, whereas this RX 460 we've side-graded it with should just give it a bit of extra life. Honestly, I do think this i7 could handle more, but at the same time, when we're targeting either 30 or 60 FPS, this should be more than good enough. Now, with the benchmarks today, I mean, I know this computer is going to someone's friend, and they'll likely be playing basic games on it, think your standard things you'd play back in school, Gary's Mod, maybe some GTA 5, bits and pieces like that, but for some reason I've got a bit carried away with the benchmarking, and I've thrown it up against titles that I didn't even think would launch on the system, just to try and eke out a playable frame rate. So it's actually surprised me a little bit just how much we've been able to get away with on a system that is in real terms cost us absolutely nothing. So it's a bit of a weird one. Anyway, I just wanted to see how the PC is now performing now that it's actually restored and looking all rather nice, and just how can it run games with the benchmarks. Starting off the benchmarks, we have GTA 5 Enhanced Edition. Fortunately, with the RX 460, despite it being very similar power to the Kepler mid-range card that was in the PC, the GTX 670, it does have more up-to-date drivers and actual support for DirectX 12 to a greater extent, meaning we were able to return a similar frame rate, now 56 FPS on average with 1% lows down to 43 FPS, but we're able to increase the game up to high settings with normal textures. This also included FXAA and HBAO, and at the same time, it's in and around 60 FPS. You could drop it back to normal, but then the CPU does become a bit more of a bottleneck as you're asking it to perform, well, it can achieve 60 FPS, but it is starting to ask a lot more of an older i7. So really, with these settings, I'm seeing this on a FreeSync monitor, so it looks very smooth, and I mean, for what is a PC we got for free and done a side grade and a clean to, not a bad result. Moving into the world of GTA Online, and we saw our average now drop down to 45 FPS, FPS, and our 1%'s now dropped down to 34 FPS. So online is still playable, but we do lose a few frames here or there, likely because we've only got 2 gigs of VRAM, and we are running an original Core i7, but still, it is one of the most played games on Steam, and it runs fine here. Moving back to the world of GTA 5 Legacy, and some people would assume that we would get a better frame rate. And to be fair, there was virtually no difference between this and the Enhanced Edition. We have a Polaris graphics card, and it deals with DirectX 12 rather well, so we pretty much saw the exact same results, but with older effects, so AMD CHS Shadow and the likes, rather than the likes of the new HBAO implementation on the Enhanced Edition. To be fair, I quite like how the AMD CHS Shadows look in this game, so to be fair, when it comes to some lighting effects, I do think the Legacy version has an edge, but still, it looked and ran pretty great with 52 FPS on average, 1% lows down to 41 FPS. I'd argue the Enhanced Edition felt slightly smoother, but the Legacy version looked slightly better. Moving on to the online version of GTA Online Legacy, and it really doesn't matter what settings you use here because it's still a bit of a mess to run. The fact that this system, which has cost us nothing to build, has averaged 36 FPS on what is an original Core i7 and a lower-end Polaris graphics card is actually a miracle to a certain extent because this does not run well. As you can see by utilization in the top left, it's all over the place, so being able to achieve over 30 FPS, I'm relatively happy with that. Counter-Strike 2 was one of our first limitations of the Core i7 being forced to pump out higher frame rates. Now both the RX 460 and the i7 were fairly matched here, and we did return a fairly decent 108 FPS average, with 1% lows down to 76 FPS, while running through the built-in benchmark map with low settings in 1080p. Overall, this wasn't too bad. Our first run is entirely negated from this because in standard AMD fashion, it is completely full of stutters your first time loading into a map, which does disappear the more you actually play through the game. So for those simpler experiences, such as a competitive match on simpler maps, you're looking at a fairly decent time. No, this is not a particularly competitive example, but look at the computer we were dealing with and where we've managed to get it to. At the end of the day, being able to return over 100 FPS on average in Counter-Strike 2 is good enough. In terms of a really CPU-intensive stress test, I did load up into Nuke with an offline practice match, and it is really rather intensive, both on the graphics card and also on the rather old processor now having to deal with the simulation of the bots. This dropped us down to 68 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 53 FPS, so once again not exactly what I call particularly competitive, but even as sort of a worst case scenario, you're still seeing over 60 FPS, which isn't terrible, it is playable. Given these benchmarks are primarily going to be about what the computer can run rather than what they will struggle with, I am going to include Counter-Strike Go as an actual benchmark here because it ran it really rather well. I joined a random server which seemed to have lots going on. It was a competitive game mode on Dust 2, so pretty reminiscent of what you'd actually be playing here, and with low everything and high shadows, which was what people used to run for competitive settings back in the day in a 1080p resolution, we really see that the i7 shines and the RX 460 doesn't do a half bad job either, returning 153 FPS on average and 1% lows down to 128 FPS. Given this was CSGO, I did get a bit carried away with it, so I did a couple of rounds, which is where the benchmark figure is taken from, and overall, it felt incredibly smooth to play on what was a completely free computer. Arc Raiders took a very long time to compile shaders. What would you expect it's doing on a Core i7 870? But at the same time, it did manage to do it. And when we actually got in game with low settings and a 900p resolution with FSR set to the balance mode, it actually ran fine. I mean, we were targeting 30 FPS here, which I think is fair enough, but it stuck pretty close to it. Even in combat, we were seeing lows of anywhere from sort of 26 to 28 FPS, which was still fully controllable. Now, Arc Raiders, I do have to give them credit here. When dealing with these lower VRAM cards, especially ones that are streaming in data a lot slower than, say, an NVMe drive or a modern SATA drive, well, it does accept this, and rather than stutter, it will just leave things a little bit blobby. So as long as you're fine playing with trees that are blobs and may take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes to load in, you can actually play Arc Raiders, and it doesn't look or run too bad. I mean, it's a 30 FPS experience. It's more or less what you'd expect from sort of an Xbox One. Given I already had it installed, I thought, you know what, if it runs Arc Raiders, is there a chance it'll run Red Dead Redemption 2? Now, of course, having a 2GB graphics card, at least a graphics card with 2GB of VRAM, is notoriously troublesome for configuring Red Dead Redemption 2 on, because you pretty much can't change the graphics settings, you are stuck using whatever it decides for you. And it decided we should be running a mixture of low and medium settings in 720p. If we could configure these around, we'd probably could make it look slightly better, but at the same time with these settings we achieved a 46 FPS average, with 1% lows down to 36 FPS. Which honestly was pretty smooth. We'd be in and around the 30 to 40 FPS range when in towns and cities, and anywhere from 50 to 60 FPS when not much was actually going on. So Red Dead Redemption 2 ran perfectly, and once again was another indicator that we likely could have got away with a more powerful graphics card. Now, this really was pushing it a little bit far. With low settings in Cyberpunk and a 720p resolution, if you believe the built-in benchmark, we can hit a capped 30 FPS. The only problem is, this benchmark is not really reminiscent of real gameplay, and real gameplay would hit these figures when not much was going on and you weren't travelling too quickly. You could enjoy the game at a locked 30 FPS. I tried adding FSR to try and keep the game closer to 30 FPS when more was going on, but unfortunately it's just not enough here. Once again though, the i7 seemed perfectly happy targeting 30 FPS in even something as recent as Cyberpunk. So honestly, I do think there is quite a lot of headroom on this little i7, given it's running with an Alaska stock cooler on a mediocre motherboard with slightly over-standard clocks. I mean, it's hovering around 2.9 GHz, but at the same time, it is more than happy to play all of these modern titles, and the RX 460 here, despite being an upgrade, or more of a side grade, was actually our limit. Miraculously, PUBG was actually able to give us a playable experience. Now, I did have a 45 FPS frame cap in place, which really did help with the overall average, because the i7 keeps wanting to be able to do more, and then it gets held up by the graphics card, and the graphics card keeps wanting to do more. It goes to show that in certain instances, they are quite balanced, and PUBG is one of the weird ones where they actually worked quite well together. With low settings and DirectX 12, which really did help out with the frame times, we returned 45 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 36 FPS. This was all in a 1080p resolution as well, and honestly, I don't think adding a better graphics card would help too much here. I mean, it may help a little bit because sometimes the RX 460 was at 100% utilization, but for a lot of this, well, for the first time in all of these benchmarks, that little Core i7-860 really was the limit. At the same time though, we were still able to target a 45 FPS frame rate, which honestly, in PUBG, it felt smoother than 30 FPS, and I'd say, on a system like this, that's good enough. Given the recent resurgence of KSP, it's giving me a great excuse to start benchmarking it again, because, I mean, this used to be a staple of benchmarks back in the day on this channel, because it's a Unity game, so it really only does stress 2 cores, but still, it's a good benchmark for your single core performance, and some of the graphical effects, especially the ones on leaving the atmosphere and re-entering the atmosphere, are rather graphically intensive. We had a 60 FPS cap in place, which just helped out with the stability of the frame rate, especially when you're on the world map. It's something that's it's well worth doing if you're running this on newer systems or even slightly more powerful systems. It just keeps the game a little bit nicer and stops it from putting too much load on your CPU to render what is just a green texture on the floor. With high and ultra settings though in 1080p, and this average is taken from launching a very, very poorly constructed spacecraft up into the atmosphere and then getting it orbiting, well, not really orbiting, this one just flung itself off into the solar system, we returned 48 FPS on average and 1% lows down to 32 FPS, which to me, that's absolutely fantastic because I used to play this on a Pentium M laptop with a Radeon X300, and yes, I did make my own config file to get it to run properly. It's always worth giving Mount & Blade Bannerlord a go because it's a fun game to play and it always seems to configure itself to the right settings for the system we're using, so I thought, you know what, this really is a bit of a curveball because the RX 460 is quite modern and the i7-860, despite being rather decent, is certainly a little bit older. It configured itself to medium and high settings in 1080p with the battle size set to medium, which is still around 400 or so they're decently large battles, and throughout the built-in benchmark we returned a result of 42 FPS with 1% lows down to 33 FPS. There was a couple of moments where it dropped to just beneath 30 FPS, but honestly, given how reminiscent this is of the late game, I'd say Mount & Blade Bannerlord, well, it looks great and it runs pretty good as well on the free computer. As always, a very popular benchmark is BeamNG because graphically it is a gorgeous looking game that can put a lot of strain on a graphics card, and processor wise, well, once you start entering the more intensive maps and having some of the more intensive options turned on, and then you start adding in traffic, well, it really does put some heavy load on the processor. The game did take quite a while to load in, but then again we are also dealing with older hardware here. With low settings, which is the low preset, so it has a mixture of low and medium in there, with traffic enabled on the jungle map in 1080p, we were able to return 38 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 32 FPS. I would say in a lot of situations we were graphically bottlenecked because the processor was able to churn out a few more frames if we dropped the resolution or dropped the settings even further, but then again once you started crashing into things and it started having to do physics simulations and bits and pieces, utilization would spike up and the processor would quickly become the limit. So honestly, BeamNG, a pretty good showing from both parts, but really both are also showing their limitations in certain aspects. It has been really enjoyable bringing back City Skylines as an actual proper benchmark that's actually got meaningful figures, thanks to the FPS boost or UI fix mod, however you want to call it. What it does is it fixes the UI bug that's still present in City Skylines. I don't know when they introduced it, but it must be a few years ago now, that causes the UI to update over 10,000 times a second, eating both your processor performance and your graphics card performance. However, there is a mod out now that fixes this and makes City Skylines pretty smooth even on hardware like this. We've got our standard benchmark town which we're building up as we benchmark on further, and with medium settings plus this mod in place in a 1080p resolution, we returned 45 FPS and 1% lows down to 32 FPS. This figure is taken from a 3x speed up to put some load on the processor, but really, most of the lows here were from zooming in with the graphics card, because I'm assuming it's still quite a VRAM hog this game, and it's no surprise that with only 2GB, sometimes zooming in could cause a few hitches or stutters, but still, a lot of the time we'd be seeing anywhere from 40 to 60 FPS while building up our city, so it was a nice game to include. Just to get in some of those older titles, and just to make sure anything Bethesda will run on here, we have Fallout 4 Anniversary, because if this runs, well then your Skyrim, your Oblivion, your Skyrim Special Edition, everything like that will work. Because to be honest, I don't think there's any way Oblivion Remastered, or by extension Starfield to be honest, will be working on here. I have been considering adding Starfield as a benchmark, so if people are interested, do let me know, because it's one that people do request, but I know that it's one that some people really just don't care about. Still, going back to the point at hand, we have Fallout 4 Anniversary here running with medium settings, and it did achieve 44 FPS on average and 1% lows down to 32 FPS. This figure is of course taken during one of the more intensive areas of the game. When you were actually out and about and not much was going on, you'd pretty much see a locked 60 FPS, but of course combat and NPCs being on screen would bring it down to that 40 FPS mark with the occasional frame drop. Really, I'd just keep these settings and cap it at 30 FPS, because that's probably the smoothest way to play it on a system like this, because Anniversary has solved a lot of problems, but it has also made it more intensive on these older systems. Finally though, can it run Crysis Remastered? To be fair, I thought this might be pushing things just a little bit, but Crysis Remastered, well, it is surprisingly well optimised, and the Core i7, well, some of the single-threaded performance left a little bit lacking in places. Some of the physics effects definitely were taking their toll, as I could see the single-core utilisation spiking up, but then again, we still did achieve 58 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 46 FPS during my usual benchmark segment. I mean, usually when I play this I don't blow myself up twice, but that happened, and I'm sure that's intensive enough that, you know what, it was able to deal with it and I was able to carry on playing. So miraculously, our free computer can't just manage Crysis, it can manage the full remaster provided we're using lower settings.
So overall performance of what was the free gaming PC. And to be fair, it's definitely passable. I mean, a lot of popular games that people are still playing do run fine. I mean, GTA 5, whether it be the enhanced or the legacy version, those were completely okay. Counter-Strike 2, I mean, I will admit that it does have its issues in some of the more intensive scenarios, but for a bit of basic competitive play, you're going to be seeing anywhere from sort of 80 to 140 FPS, which is certainly more than good enough on a PC like this. No one looking at getting into the competitive scene is running an original Core i7 and an RX 460. I'm very aware of that, but it's more than enough to actually just have a bit of fun with the game. And to be fair, if you're just having fun, CSGO runs absolutely perfect. Ark Raiders was definitely a surprise, and by extension Red Dead Redemption 2, but by the time you get to things like Cyberpunk, well, we do begin to see the limitations of the system. But still, for what the PC is, plenty of legacy titles work absolutely fine, plenty of popular indie titles work fantastically, and lots of the slightly older AAA titles, they're still the games people are playing today, well, they run perfect. So it's not really a bad system, this is it really, to be honest, because, I mean, yes, you could argue we've replaced the GTX 670, but, I mean, there's a video on the channel showing the performance of the GTX 670, and it's pretty much the exact same performance we're getting here. So we have very literally side-graded and modernised the PC to give it some extra longevity and some better drivers, because at least AMD is still updating these Polaris cards, which just helps whoever this PC goes to not have to worry about being out of date on drivers. You don't get any pop-up saying your PC might not run this game. I think one of my biggest takeaways, though, is the RX 460, we could have gone a lot further than that. In most games, the bottleneck wasn't the old i7. That was still doing far better than it has any right to. These are from, what, 2008, 2009? And I get they were high-end, but come on, it's not been the limit in anything. With a better graphics card, we could have seen Cyberpunk being playable, and I don't doubt we might have even got into something like Oblivion Remastered. It might have taken us a while, but even then, with 8 threads, could we have made it playable? It's still a question that I'm very intrigued about. Given this PC is nothing more than a free computer, it's not really worth discussing any of the power consumption or thermal figures in great detail. Really, all you need to know is the processor generally hovered in and around 60 to 70 degrees. It's about to be expected. It's an original Core i7 running with what is, frankly, a too small Arctic cooler, but it's enough to at least keep it at operating temperatures. And the RX 460, this is a basic OEM unit. It gets around the mid-70s, occasionally touching 80 if it's under very heavy load. I mean, it's not exactly a fancy cooler, but it's also not using much power. You can do some media work on the computer, mostly because you do have AMD VCE on the system, which I simply did a recording via the drivers. You can also use OBS. It's nothing amazing. Polaris did bring a few improvements, I believe, but it's also nothing extraordinary. But it does mean that you could record, and you could stream, and you can edit with some degree of graphical acceleration using what is a completely free computer. Now, some people will chime in and say, oh, but that's because you added the RX 460. Well, yes, the Kepler also has this. Admittedly, it's an older version of NVENC, but if we left the GTX 670 in there, it's still about the same quality of recording by today's standards. It's enough to get you by, and it will do some acceleration. So whether you go with the AMD card that's in here, or the NVIDIA one that was, it's going to do about the same. The i7, actually really speedy for getting around day to day, but rendering tasks probably will make it struggle. But of course, some people are going to be asking for Linux. So fortunately, I do keep a Linux SSD on hand, and hopefully the system does boot with it. I've not yet recorded this segment yet, so I am going to try and put Linux on the PC just to see if it is a viable solution. I mean, at the end of the day, we've come quite far since the start of the day, given this thing was filthy and hardly worked, and we've just ran it through an entire benchmark suite, stressed it out, got plenty of figures out of it, and it's still going strong. At this point, it is just purely, is there anything extra we can do to eke out some extra performance that wasn't from tweaks or overclocking? And of course, one of the main things will be, can it run Linux? It's going to have lower overheads. Not that Windows 11 IoT has been a problem on this system, but it's time to find out if maybe Linux can offer us any degree of additional performance on this rather cheap, it's not even cheap, it's a completely free computer, isn't it? So, as we've seen, performance over on Windows, for a completely free PC that, has taken us a whole day to get to this point, has been pretty solid. I don't know what's happening at the moment. It's still running the CPU-Z stress test, and I've closed CPU-Z, but it's still running. But that's besides the point. That's probably just a quirk. So, let's turn this off, because I want to run Linux. Now, it's not going to be the most in-depth Linux testing you've ever seen before, because all I want to do is see if it's speedy enough and if it works. So I believe in my pile of SSDs, this one has Elementary OS already set up on it. And I'm going to be very lazy while doing this, and we're just going to simply unplug the boot drive and then plug in another boot drive. We can plug this in. I believe there's a SATA cable here. There are much better ways of running Linux, but I just honestly just want to see if it'll boot to one that's already pre-installed. It's honestly been really solid though. I'm really happy about the RX 460 as a side grade, but I do think the i7 will be capable of so much more. In terms of expandability on this PC, this is because of my capture card. So if you did a new cooler, more RAM, better graphics card, you've already got the power supply in place for it. You could probably run an RX 580 or a GTX 1060 absolutely fine on here. Okay, boot to the Patriot Burst, and this should just boot up to Linux. The purple screen should disappear. For some reason, my capture card just really enjoys changing boot screens around. It's a good capture card for what it is, but it does struggle with some of these odd boot resolutions, especially on these older motherboards. Right, we'll let that boot up, see what it does. Our first attempt of Elementary OS earlier on in the video wasn't a success, but nothing about this is USB. In fact, before I forget to do that, unplug the NTFS game drive because I don't want to re-download everything again when it decides it wants to kill it. So this should already be set up with RX 460 drivers. One thing I am curious about, and this is a very stupid curiosity, does Ethernet work on Linux? Because this is one easy win. If we unplug the Elec Moga wireless adapter and plug in Ethernet, doing something, it actually has connected to the internet. And what would be the equivalent of blue screen, a kernel panic? If we run Neofetch real quick though, we should be able to see our specs. Okay, it is quicker here on Linux. Right, so we've got the Core i7-860 and the Radeon RX 460. But Steam is already set up on this drive. I've already just got this ready to go because it's running all the drivers I need, and we should just be able to simply launch straight up into Steam, let it re-download any bits it needs to, and see how performance is doing here. It's not catchy OS, but at the same time, it's still a Linux distro, isn't it? Well, it's now the following day, and to be fair, I've been dabbling around with Linux on here, and to be fair, it's actually been really, really nice. So if you are running what is some relatively older hardware, the fact we've got the Polaris graphics card means that Linux is fine. I do think we're going to do a couple of gaming benchmarks. Now, I've not tweaked the graphics card, so it's not running an overclock or the increased power limits or anything like that, so performance will likely be slightly worse, but at the same time, we can still do a little bit of benchmarking. So I've got a couple of games installed. We've got GTA 5 Enhanced, Halo MasterChef Collection, and BeamNG. I just want to get some rough performance figures to see how it's doing over on Linux, because everyone enjoys seeing it. Really, Catchy OS would probably be a good choice here, because with the new VRAM optimizations, it would probably help out with just the 2 gigabytes we've got. But at the same time, these aren't very serious benchmarks. These are just a little additional ones to see how it's doing with Linux, and the fact I've already got Elementary OS already set up with games downloaded makes this all easier. So why don't we do a couple of additional Linux benchmarks? Right, so I've got GTA 5 here, and yeah, it does appear that RAM management is certainly a little bit worse here over on Linux. It kind of makes sense. We've only got 2 gigs of VRAM, and we aren't running with any real optimizations. So what I am probably going to do is drop the resolution down to just 720p, just see how it's running. It's not really helped too much. Yeah, it's the graphics card struggling here, and I think one of the main reasons it is struggling is the VRAM. Once again, if we actually put a better graphics card in this would likely be a better experience, but at the same time, I think this is both times we've looked at the RX 460 now. With 2 gigs of VRAM, it does okay on Linux in certain titles, but when you start getting into these newer, more intensive ones, we've dropped it back to 720p now, and we're still seeing in and around 20 FPS. The utilization's at 100%. I know we're not running with the overclock or the power limit removed. Even then, it should be able to run 1080p or at the very least 720p. So it's a bit of a weird one. Processor-wise, though, it's not exactly doing anything strenuous. It's running at about sort of 40 to 50%. So GTA 5, not exactly great, but why don't we move on to something else, say BeamNG, which has a native port. Well, with BeamNG here, what I've decided to do is automatically launch the game with the lowest settings because, well, on 2 gigs of VRAM, I think anything more than this would be completely unplayable. And to be fair, it's running okay. I really should do a bit more Linux testing on lower amounts of VRAM. I mean, now that I actually have CatchOS set up on my actual desktop, we could actually do a quick look at the RX 460 over on Linux. It wouldn't take me too long to do, but then again, there's also probably not a great deal of video in it, so it'd probably end up being maybe even a short or something like that. But yeah, BeamNG here, I mean, I'd say it's okay. I've already destroyed the truck, so it's not doing too well. I'll respawn it in. The processor, once again, absolutely fine. This little Core i7 has really impressed me. For a processor from 2008, 2009, it's literally fine for an entry-level gaming PC still. It's done absolutely a-okay. The main issue is the 2 gigs of RAM on the RX 460. It's just struggling. As we can see here, by any time we go into foliage and it drops down to sort of 15 to maybe 20 FPS. So BeamNG, I think that's about as much testing as we need to do. Why don't we finish with the MasterChef collection? Now I have got the MasterChef collection here. We're running Halo Reach with original settings, and it's always a pretty good experience here on Linux. I mean, to be fair, even on this very mediocre setup, we're pretty much seeing Xbox 360 quality, but in 1080p. There are definitely a few frame drops in places, which appears to be, once again, due to VRAM. We are using 3.6 gigabytes of our available 2. So yeah, it's still not a perfect experience. I'd imagine a different distro would likely help, but at the same time, we are seeing averages of around 59 to 60 FPS. It's just the 1% lows down to anywhere in and around 30 FPS that are feeling a tad jittery. I suppose we could cap the frame rate, but honestly, I'd just whack in a new graphics card rather than faffing about like that. This looks and it's running pretty good, so I can't really argue with it too much. At the same time, you could definitely do better than this. And it is stabilizing a little bit now. Maybe a few of those stutters were shader related. It is also using our processor a bit more than the other games were. We're now hovering up to near 70% utilization, but then again, it may also just be the game. It's so odd how good the MasterChef collection actually runs on Linux, because I swear a lot of the time our performance can actually be, well, better. But there are definitely a few frame pacing problems going on, and I think all of them are graphics card related. And yeah, when there's lots of particle effects going on and more NPCs, it certainly is dipping in and around 30 FPS mark a little bit more. So it's not too bad, it's running, I'm happy with it, and I'm going to say, you know what, the Linux experience, maybe a different distro would help, but a different graphics card with more VRAM would certainly help a lot more. So there we have it. Our completely free PC runs Linux absolutely a-okay. The processor is very happy here, the 16 gigs of RAM's not a problem, and our little Sidegrade RX 460, it's doing a lot better than a GTX card would. It's pretty much the limit, not because of power, but because of VRAM. And it must be said, as much as Linux has come a long way with how it deals with VRAM, lower VRAM cards do tend to perform slightly better on Windows. And this has gone on to show that. It's not exactly a scientific test because we're not be comparing like for like, but hey, if you've got a little PC like this, Linux isn't a bad shout, but probably more for the day-to-day rather than the gaming. So there we have it, the completely free gaming PC. Now, what I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to be giving it back to the original owner. Now it's pretty much been completely restored and had a few sensible side grades and more safe upgrades made, namely just the power supply and bits. And if I get any more CPU coolers in stock in the meantime, chances are I will be changing the cooler, because I usually keep these little £5 AliExpress coolers on hand that, of course, I mean, they've got copper heat pipes. They will do a lot better of a job than these Alaska coolers would. And it just brings some of the noise levels down slightly. Not that the PC is noisy by any stretch of the imagination compared to how it was before, with the constant grinding noises and bits and pieces like that. Fortunately, I've already seen my footage now, and a lot of the noise reduction I do has actually brought it down to a level where you can just about hear it in the background, but in person, it was completely deafening. I will insert a clip here. just so you can hear how bad it was. So I hope that clears up a few bits in case you're wondering, why was I complaining about it being noisy? Well, trust me, this video would have been unbearable had I left it in the background. So, when it comes to this computer, I mean, at least the person getting it's able to play a few games on it, quite a few modern titles actually, but they can also do a few upgrades on it if they really wanted. I mean, you could whack in, as I said, a GTX 1060 or an RX 580, and you're looking at an even more solid experience, but really, you can just go until the Core i7 becomes the limit. One of the advantages of going with a new cooler is you whack a nice overclock on this, and maybe you could get away with even a 1070 or something like that, provided you don't mind higher settings, but at a capped 30 FPS frame rate, because processors seem to just live on insane amounts of time, provided you don't mind capping the frame rate to keep those frame times stable. We've seen it plenty of times before, and I usually include it in processor benchmarks, but this has been a monumental amount of work. I thought I'd just do a little bit of a favour for someone, surprise them with a computer that's been rebuilt. And what has ended up being a 4-5 day saga of rebuilding this system, getting it all working, getting it upgraded, and even going as far as testing Linux to find more limitations. It has really been an interesting one, but I hope you've all enjoyed. It has really been a hodgepodge video that I was going to put out last night, but it just kept spiraling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it was all stuff I wanted to include. So thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and good night.